There's a question sitting in the back of your mind right now. One you've been carrying so long it started to feel like furniture. And at some point, you stopped asking it out loud. Not because you found the answer, but because the asking itself started to hurt. We're talking about the kind of questions that don't have a Wikipedia page, a Reddit thread, or a therapist copay that actually solves them. The why did they leave? The what is my actual purpose? The did I make the right call back in 2011 variety? These are the questions that live rent-free in your skull, redecorating at 3 in the morning when you were supposed to be sleeping. Here's what nobody tells you. The human brain is essentially a biological answer-seeking missile, and when it can't lock onto a target, it starts firing at everything nearby. Psychologists call this cognitive closure need, and some of us, overachievers, perfectionists, people who Google symptoms at midnight, have it in absolutely catastrophic quantities. The irony is that the more intelligent and self-aware you are, the worse this gets. You can see the uncertainty clearly, map its edges, name its texture, and still have absolutely zero control over whether it resolves, which is the psychological equivalent of being handed a puzzle and then told half the pieces were never manufactured. For me, the breaking point wasn't a dramatic epiphany, it was a Tuesday, which is somehow more insulting. I had been circling the same 3 unresolved questions for roughly 4 years. Whether a relationship ending was my fault, whether I chose the right career direction, and whether a person I lost could have been saved if I'd been paying closer attention. Notice what those questions have in common. They are all about the past. They're all about control I didn't actually have. And they're all completely, cosmically unanswerable with the information available to me. That's the trap. We treat hindsight like it's a trial, where we're the defendant, the prosecutor, and somehow also expected to deliver the verdict. The historical data here is not encouraging. By the way, studies suggest humans are remarkably bad at predicting what will make them happy, terrible at evaluating past decisions fairly, and spectacularly overconfident that more information would have changed outcomes. We are, to use a technical term, not great at this. But here's what changed for me. And it wasn't a meditation retreat or a book with a watercolor cover. It was noticing that the questions weren't actually asking to be answered. They were asking to be held, acknowledged, given a seat at the table without being handed the microphone for the rest of the evening. The moment I accepted uncertainty wasn't serene, it felt more like exhaling after holding your breath so long you forgot you were doing it. I literally said out loud to no one, I don't know, and I'm gonna stop pretending that not knowing means I failed. Now, practically speaking, because philosophy without action is just very expensive anxiety, here's what actually helped. First, I wrote each unresolved question on paper, not to answer it, but to formally acknowledge it existed the way you'd introduce a difficult relative at a family dinner, rather than pretending they weren't standing in the corner. Second, I set what I can only describe as a jurisdiction boundary for each question, meaning I asked myself, is there any action available to me right now that could resolve this? And if the answer was no, the question got moved to a different mental folder labeled not my case anymore. It sounds absurdly corporate for an existential crisis, but it works because your brain responds well to process even when it can't respond to resolution. Third, and this one sounds soft until it doesn't, I got aggressively comfortable with saying I don't know out loud in conversation, which turns out to be a social superpower because everyone around you is also faking certainty and visibly relieved when someone stops. We are all, to a stunning degree, winging it with confidence borrowed from people who are also winging it. The misconception worth dismantling here is that accepting uncertainty means giving up or not caring it doesn't. And conflating the two is how people stay stuck performing the appearance of resolution while actually just rotating through the same anxious loop in a new outfit. Acceptance is not apathy. It is the decision to stop spending energy on a problem that has no return address. What the data from actual behavioral science suggests, and what every wisdom tradition from Stoicism to Buddhism arrived at through very different routes, is that psychological flexibility, the ability to hold difficult thoughts without being controlled by them, is one of the strongest predictors of long-term well-being. You are not solving the question. You are changing your relationship to the fact that it exists. Here's a philosophical punchline. Some questions are not doors waiting to be opened, they are walls. And the useful skill is learning to build your life around them rather than spending decades trying to knock them down with your forehead. The unanswered questions are part of the architecture now, and honestly, they make the structure more interesting. Discipline here looks like returning to your process journaling, the jurisdictional sorting, the out loud acknowledgement every time the question flares up. Not because you've beaten it, but because you've stopped needing to. And consistency means doing this on the Tuesdays, the 3 in the mornings, the anniversaries of the things that still sting, without waiting for a version of yourself that has already figured it out to show up and handle it. The questions I still carry, and I do still carry them, have become less like open wounds and more like old scars that occasionally ache before rain. I'm not comfortable with not knowing in the way someone comfortable with not knowing would describe it, but I'm functional, I'm moving, and I've stopped letting the absence of an answer function as evidence of a personal failure. If any of this landed somewhere useful for you, you already know what to do. And if you like what we're doing here, subscribe and go explore everything else we've made, because we're just getting started.